Hello everyone, this is going to be a tutorial on how to use the psycopg library in order to connect Python to a PostgreSQL database. So what I'm going to show you in this tutorial is basically how to create a connection, run a simple query. After that, I'm going to show you how to run a simple insert and update command to update data into an existing table. And finally, I'll show you how to create a schema and upload new data from a CSV file over to the database. So in order to get started, make sure you have Python installed. My preferred Python installation comes from Miniconda. We're going to be using the psycopg library, so make sure that this is also installed. Now, in order to create this tutorial, I just spun up an Amazon RDS instance with PostgreSQL. There's a free tier, so if you want to try this at home, you can. Now, as is typical with my other tutorials, the code will be available at GitHub. I'll post a link in the description. And if you found any of this useful, please just leave a like. Now, in order to get started, I'm going to show you just how my database is set up. So we're going to be working with very exciting weather data. I have a schema called Texas, where I have a table called weather county. And essentially what I'm storing is just weather data. So just the temperature for the day or whatever. So I have a column for the ID, a column for the FIPS code, which is a unique code for each county in Texas. I have the county name, the temperature, and Fahrenheit, and just two timestamps showing when the record was created and when it was updated. Next, I just inserted some 4 records into the table, and you can see that the 4 records are right here below. So what I'm going to show you is essentially how to run these types of queries using psycopg2 in a Jupyter Notebook environment. If you have this repo downloaded locally and you want to try this at home, just run on a terminal Jupyter Notebook to start the notebooks. I already have this running in the background, so I'm just going to go to my notebooks. So the first notebook that I want to show you is this connect to PSQL DB. Now at the top, I've essentially laid out some essential steps. You want to make sure that psycopg2 is installed. If you don't have that installed already, there are the commands. You want to store your secrets, your database credentials somewhere safe, and you want to then create database connection, create a cursor, and finally run a simple query. So this first cell that I'm going to run essentially imports psycopg, which is the library I use to connect to PSQL. I'm importing pandas for data analysis, whatever. And I'm importing this custom module called AWS Secrets, which contain my database credentials. I have a function here called create RW connection, which is create a read and write connection. And what essentially I'm doing is I'm passing along those database credentials to psycopg to create a connection, and then I'm returning that connection. So I'm going to create the connection, and from that connection, I'm going to create a cursor. And now I'm just going to do a simple select everything from Texas.weather county. And you can see that I've obtained 3 records out of the 4 that are currently in that table, and they're all in just a list, tuples, and I can also call on the description of each of those columns. So you can see that I have my ID, my FIPS code, county name, etc. So that's not really too pretty to look at, so I've written up a function called fetch results, which essentially just puts those results into a data frame. So if I run that, you can now see that that has now been stored into a data frame. Now the next notebook I want to show you is this insert new weather data. Um, so I'm going to open that up, and essentially what I'm going to show you now is how to insert a new record into my weather county table. So I have those same libraries. I'm going to import them, and then I have those two same functions that I ran in the previous notebook, the one to create my connection and the one to fetch my results and put them into a data frame. So now I'm just gonna create a new connection. I'm gonna run the cell that has my query. It's a simple insert query, so I'm gonna insert a new row into texas.weathercounty. Next, I'm going to create a cursor and use that cursor to execute my SQL query command. Very important, I've added a connection commit here. Essentially, what happens is that once you make a change to your database, you need to commit those changes, otherwise, they won't be reflected on the database. So next, I'm closing the connection and creating a new connection. And just to verify that the results were updated, I'm fetching the results from Texas weather. And you can see here that that new record was updated. So we have our database table updated with a new record. The next thing that I want to show you is how to do an insert and update. So as I showed you before, there is a unique constraint on FIPS code, so there can only be one record with that same FIPS code, so one temperature per county essentially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a bunch of data, and what's going to happen is on those existing records, there's going to be a conflict, but on that conflict, instead of an insert, I'm going to do an update. And I'm replacing the old temperature with the new temperature. So I'm going to run this string, the cell that contains my query, and then just as shown above, I'm going to create a cursor with a connection and execute that cursor or execute that query and commit those changes to the database. And now I'm going to check that those changes are reflected, and they are. Now, the last notebook that I want to show you is this new schemas table insert. And what I'm going to show you is essentially how to create a new schema and a new table and upload new data into those new schemas and tables. So just as was done in previous notebooks, I'm going to import my libraries, and I'm going to run the cell that contains my functions. I have a new function here, and this is exec SQL. Basically, it's a function that just runs my queries. And there's essential thing here, piece here, that if I want to commit changes, I just set that flag to true, and all my database connection or changes get committed. So I'm going to run the cell. I'm creating a new connection, and I have that ready for when I need to run my queries. I'm going to load in the new data, and this is just new weather data that was found, and it's stored in a CSV file, so I'm going to load that with pandas. And I have new weather data for various states. So I have 3 states here in this data frame. So I have data for Texas, I have data for California, and data for New York. Schemas for and tables for California and New York don't exist, so I'll need to create those. And one thing that I'm going to do here is that I've just mapped those 2-letter abbreviations over to longer strings. So instead of CA, it's now California. Instead of TX, it's Texas. Instead of NY, it's New York. Now I want to move on to preparing the queries that I need to run in order to create my schemas and tables. So the first query here just creates a new schema for any given state, and that second query creates a table. So we have that state that needs that schema and table created, and it also creates weather county with the same parameters as Texas. So now I'm going to group the data by state, and I'm going to create that schema and table. And you can see that the output shows that the schema and table were created, but just to verify that, I'm going to check that within schema, within information schema. So I'm going to run this query that should show that which tables and schemas exist. You can see that for myself, which I'm the owner of this database, I have 3 schemas and 3 tables. The next thing that I need to do is upload that new data into my tables. So I'm going to import a new function from psycopg2 that is execute values, and I'm going to create a new connection. And I have this new query, which is that Upsert style query, which is where we insert data, but on conflict, instead of an insert, we do an update. So I'm updating that query, and now I'm grouping my data again by state, and whenever we encounter state with data, we upload that data. And you can see that the output notifies us that the upsert was done and changes were committed. And now just to verify that this was successfully done, I'm going to look at California, Weather County, and see if the data was uploaded. And now we can see here that we have 10 records just as a sample output, showing again that this query insert was successful. So just to summarize, essentially what we covered was how to create a connection to a PSQL database, run some simple queries, insert and update, and create new schemas and tables. And again, all my code will be available in my GitHub repo. I'll post a link in the description. And again, if you found any of this useful, feel free to leave a like. Thank you again for watching.